Boy, do I love me some iPad rumors and speculations. Now, let's talk about these rumors and speculations for upcoming iPads. Of course, the only new iPad that we officially got for 2020 so far is going to be the new iPad Pro. And that new iPad Pro 2020 version doesn't even look different than the iPad from 2018. It pretty much shares everything. The only two main differences with that iPad are going to be it does have a better camera on the back. It does support some new AR functionality, which is nice. And then on top of that, it did get a slightly faster GPU, but for the most part, you probably couldn't even tell it was a brand new iPad from Apple, considering that it doesn't look different than the iPad Pro from 2018. And now with that out of the way, anything's up in the air for what Apple could potentially be doing for brand new iPads for 2020 and 2021, just due to the fact that, like I said, Apple only refreshed the iPad Pro line kind of, and they really didn't refresh anything else. So most things in Apple's lineup when it comes to the iPads are getting pretty old at this point. They're maybe close to a year old or over a year old at this point, and it's about time that Apple did something with the rest of the line. And most likely that's what Apple's going to do, of course, because a lot of these tablets have older CPUs and things like that, and it's about time they actually refresh them and actually give them an update as well. You didn't think they were just going to leave them untouched and keep these iPads forever. Of course not. First off, let's actually go to Apple's website and let's actually take a look at what Apple has to offer. Now, these are all the current tablets that Apple has to offer, outside of, for some reason, the iPad Mini. They don't show the iPad Mini in comparison, but here is the iPad Mini. So all in all, they do actually have 4 current tablets on the market. You can see right here they do have the iPad Pro 4th generation, which again they did refresh this one recently a couple months ago, so it is up to a 2020, but sadly it really didn't get a bump in performance. Really, it did get a slightly faster GPU, but that's about it, which is kind of a shame. And then we got the iPad Air 3rd generation, and then we got the base model. The base model is the iPad 7th generation, which this one is one of the more newer ones. The CPU is not new at all. It's one of the older iPhone chips, but just the fact that it did come out in September of 2019 means that it is one of the more newer ones alongside the iPad Pro. Both the iPad Air 3rd generation and the iPad Mini are about a year old now, or a little bit over a year old now, so those ones are really due for a brand new update in my opinion, and I really do think Apple is actually going to be updating those quite soon. And a lot of times they do these at like different events, especially like I think the iPhone event, like last year for instance, Apple did actually unveil the brand new base model iPad 7th generation that replaced the other base model, I think from 2018. So that was actually pretty nice there, which was actually very, very good. And let's talk about some of these rumors and speculations, because they are pretty interesting right now. So basically, one of the first things that we notice here, the screen sizes. Of course, when it comes to devices, when it comes specifically to iPads, Apple really likes playing with a lot of different screen sizes. So expect Apple to potentially maybe be changing some of the screen sizes for some of their iPad lines, just because that's what they're actually known for, and that's actually what they've been doing a lot. Like for instance, if you remember the base model used to be 9.7 inches, but no longer does Apple make 9.7. And honestly, I'm actually pretty happy with that, because I think it's good for the consumer, because the consumer gets a little bit more screen real estate, especially when you're using something like an iPad. A lot of people use the iPad for multimedia, like watching videos, watching movies, and if you're not doing things like that on your iPad, you might be doing things like productivity. Now that all the iPads do support the Apple Pencil, you may want to do things like drawing, take notes, and things like that. So it's always nice to see that these screens keep getting bigger. Even if it's only a couple of inches, it's still nice to get a bigger screen, of course, which is actually nice. So the first rumor is, for instance, like the iPad Air 3rd generation is supposed to be getting one of the biggest increases in the actual design of the actual tablet. Like for instance, they said it's supposed to be going up to 10.8 inches. Do I actually believe Apple might actually be bumping this up to 10.8 inches? Actually, I think that could actually be real, just due to the fact that if you remember the original iPad Air, which was pretty much the only model they made back in the day, back in I think 2013 or 2012, but regardless, that was the only one on the market for the iPad line, and it was 9.7 inches. Now you can see it's come quite a long way, at least in terms of the actual screen real estate, and the screen on this one is 10.5 inches. So I do believe that rumor being true about it being a 10.8 inch device. But the crazier thing about this rumor is it's not just going to be a bump in the actual screen size of the iPad Air 4 that's supposed to be coming either this year or next year. Apparently, it's supposed to share a lot of the same designs as the iPad Pro, which I don't know if I believe that, but I can see that being a reality. That would actually be really a dream come true, just due to the fact that there's no other iPad that looks like the iPad Pro. You know how it doesn't have any bezels around, or it has a bezel around it, but it doesn't have a big forehead and chin on it. It has no home button. And things like that, and that would actually be really nice because, for instance, if you look at all the iPads that they currently sell, again, the iPad Pro is the only one that looks futuristic, that gives you a lot of screen real estate. It looks modern, but all the other iPads, like the iPad Air, the iPad 7th generation, and now the iPad Mini, all look like they're old iPads from like decades ago. So it's about time that they do something with that. I mean, I can see them not doing that as well, not making the iPad Air 4th generation look like the iPad Pro, just due to the fact that they kind of do have to give you somewhat of a reason to not potentially want to buy something that's a little bit less, that's a little bit cheaper than something like the iPad Pro. So by doing things like making it look a little less newer, looking a little bit older, doing things a little bit different, makes you want to actually, it basically gives you reasons to actually buy something like the iPad Pro. If they start doing all these different things to make these things more closer and more likely, more like the iPad Pro line, then what's the incentive to buy the iPad Pro line? So of course that may not be real, but I can see that possibly being a thing, because if you look what Samsung is doing on their Samsung Galaxy Tab S6 line, I think they recently released a Samsung Galaxy S6 tablet, and it was a light version, and that light version of that tablet actually shares the same design as something like the their base model, the regular model, the Tab S6. The Tab S6 Lite is the same thing. It just has weaker. It has like a weaker. Overall, it just has weaker specs. It has a weaker display. Overall, it's just a cheaper version. But it's actually very cool that Samsung and that tablet actually decided to make it look like their more premium model. So even though you are getting less in terms of performance, in terms of a lot of different things, it is nice. It just, the design of it looks much more like their more premium model. So if Apple actually decided to do something like that, that would actually be amazing. And honestly, I would be all for that. And that would almost not really guarantee you never to buy like the iPad Pro, but just the fact that it does share, it potentially could share the same design as the iPad Pro would actually be amazing, because I know a lot of people buy the iPad Pro not just for how amazing the actual performance is, but just due to the fact that it practically almost has no bezels. At least it doesn't have a big forehead and chin when it actually comes to devices. It looks modern. Overall, that would be actually pretty awesome. And of course, the screen would be 10.8 inches. Apparently, what I heard is, from all these rumors and speculations, what they're going to do with the iPad Air 3. Again, these are always rumors and speculations, but apparently what Apple is actually going to do is they're pretty much just going to make apparently what they would do is they would just take the design of the iPad Pro, but then make the bezels a little bit more chunkier on it, but it would still share that same design right there, where it didn't have a big forehead and a chin, and it would obviously remove the home button, so you would be using gestures. But I'm pretty sure a lot of people are used to using gestures in iOS now, just because the iPhone has gestures, and if you're on the iPad Pro, you're using gestures. You're not using a home button anymore to actually bring up things like multitasking, going to your home screen, and things like that. So that makes sense. And the other rumor, which is actually pretty big as well, this one's actually much more interesting, is the fact that the iPad Mini is supposed to be, or might be, getting a slight upgrade. Apparently the screen on the brand new iPad is supposed to be going up to like 8.9 inches or 9.2 inches or something like that. I believe that might be real. And fun fact, if you didn't actually know this, I'm pretty sure the iPad Mini line, ever since it came out a long time ago, I'm pretty sure the iPad mini never actually got a bump in screen size. It's the only model of the iPad that they haven't upgraded the screen. All these other iPads, like the iPad Air and even the base model, has gotten a brand new screen size. This used to be 9.7 on the base model, but now it's actually a 10.2 inch screen. But basically, what they want to do on the iPad mini line, they actually want to bump the screen up, like I said, to 9.0 or 9.2. Of course, no one really knows because these are still rumors and speculations at this point. That would actually be really awesome, but I have two big concerns here. One concern is, how are they going to get that bigger screen? Are they actually going to make the device bigger, the whole body of the tablet actually bigger, or are they going to do something like they would possibly do back on the iPad Air line? Would they actually just make it look more like the iPad Pro? Because the whole thing with the iPad mini line is the fact that it is a mini form of the iPad, and you would buy it because it is mini. But if they're going up to something like a 9-inch screen or anything bigger than 7.9, and they actually made the device slightly bigger, of course that would mean that you would lose the whole point of the iPad mini, because you don't want to make the iPad mini bigger than it already is, because that size is perfect, and by making it a little bit bigger, it's not really mini anymore. So what I really do think would be the practical idea, if these rumors are true for specifically the iPad mini, I really do think Apple basically would want to do it, just make it look like the iPad Pro, where it pretty much has no forehead and chin, and pretty much has a unibodied bezel around the screen, and I think that would be the greatest idea. But it's Apple, and I can still see them actually making this thing with a bigger screen and actually making the device slightly much more bigger in size, the whole body of the actual tablet. And of course, they can't make every tablet. I'm assuming Apple wouldn't make every tablet outside of the iPad Pro share the same design with that one, but again, that would actually be pretty cool. Of course, if they were to do bigger screen sizes for a lot of these different iPads, of course, what they would have to do is, of course, everything else, if they did that design would have to be worse. Of course, like for instance, the processors on the other models would probably be a little bit less worse, and things like that. It wouldn't get things like, maybe for instance, it wouldn't get like USB type C, it wouldn't get like quad speaker setups and things like that. And next up, let's talk about something else. Apparently, the iPad 7th generation is also going to be getting a brand new update. Apparently, from what I heard, they're not going to be doing all too much for this tablet, since this is the base model, and you have to look at it at the price that they're actually selling this thing. This thing is only going for $350, which is actually pretty insane, because honestly, for me personally, I never thought we would be in a world where iPads would cost anything less than $500. I just never thought that was the case, because for many years, Apple just stuck to the same $9.7, $500 price point for the base model when it comes to their one iPad fits everybody model. But basically, what they might do with this one is, believe it or not, they might actually keep this screen size 10.2, I think, and then basically what they're going to do is, from what the rumors and speculations are floating around, or what people are saying, is they might actually put a laminated display on this, because I think this is the only iPad that Apple actually has in their lineup as of today you can buy that doesn't have a laminated display, and it also doesn't have a True Tone or two-tone display, basically, where it changes the colors to match your environment and things like that. That one I can see them not actually putting on this iPad altogether, because they got to try to cut corners as much as possible, and they have to give you reasons to want to upgrade from the base model to things like the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, or even the iPad mini, which is interesting. The one bummer, apparently, just like they did, I think, for one of the other iPads, I do believe, is, I think this one they didn't actually change the processor in it. They pretty much kept the same processor. I do believe that it said, here we go, here's a new iPad for 2019, and they released it, but they did upgrade at least the screen on it, so you did get a little bit more screen real estate, which would make sense. So overall, I'm actually pretty happy and pretty excited about all these rumors and speculations on all these different iPads. I guess another pretty crazy rumor is, apparently they're still working on, also, I didn't mention that that iPad Pro with like a mini LED display. And of course, all these iPads to date just have, I think, standard LCDs. They're still phenomenal LCDs, but when you look at things like other types of displays on the market, it's about time that Apple did something with these displays and maybe bump the resolution up or something, because these displays are practically the same displays that we've had on previous iPads for who knows how long. So it would be nice if somehow, at least with like the iPad Pro, give them like a much more better display. I don't think they would use things like a OLED and things like that. I think they would do mini LED, but apparently mini LED is supposed to be better than things like standard LCD and these panels that we are using today. So yeah, the rumor mill's just really heating up and really getting really crazy when we actually talk about iPads and the state of iPads in 2020 and moving on to 2021. So I'm very excited to see if all these rumors are true. If they do what the rumors say they're going to do, some of the iPads would be a must-buy. It almost feels like that some of these rumors that people are actually talking about don't seem real at all, because it really does seem like with all these rumors that are floating around, if you took all the rumors and put them into these new iPads, it almost gives a lot of people less incentive to buy something like the iPad Pro, because some of those rumors are just too amazing to believe, and that would actually be very awesome. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.